In this video, I'm going to show you how to place the front catalytic converter. This is also known as bank 2 or left bank on this Dodge Grand Caravan. Let's get started. Now looking from underneath in the front of the vehicle, you'll see this downstream O2 sensor. That white connector there is actually the plug for this O2 sensor. So we're going to start by disconnecting that. Grab onto it. There's a tab up top that if you squeeze, you should be able to pull this connector out. A lot of times they get stuck because of sand buildup. There we go. Lots of sand in there. And now let's grab an O2 sensor socket. You can also use a 22mm wrench if you want to, but an O2 sensor socket will usually grab onto this better. Slide it over the sensor and turn it counterclockwise to break it free. There we go. Now just unthread the sensor. And there it is. To unplug the upstream O2 sensor, we have to go from the top. The connector is that little white piece right there. You can see it right between your fan and the engine cover here. So reach down. You're gonna have to pry this wire harness out of the way. Press on the tab and unplug it. There we go. And you can see the oxygen sensor right from the top. It's easiest to get it with a tubular style socket on this one. Unless all you have is the crow's foot style, you can still fit it down there, but it's going to be a little bit more bulky because it will go sideways. However, the tubular style should fit a lot better. Break it free. There we go. Now, if you twist the wire, you should be able to twist the O2 sensor out of its port. And there it is. Now underneath you ideally would have a nut and a bolt or stud and a bolt, whatever is supposed to be here. Clearly everything I have here has crumbled to pieces and I have basically only one option at this point, and that's to break this off, and hopefully this piece will punch right out. If not, I'll have to cut it. But basically you should be able to unbolt your flange here. I'm going to have to just break the rest of this off. Okay, there's that piece. Now we also have to unbolt this rear flange, and once again for me it is in extremely poor condition. I'm just going to have to put new hardware on this, which is fine, just like the front one. I'm going to break these off and then we can move the pipe around as needed to get that front catalytic converter off. There's the gasket. All right, we have separation here. Now there are only 2 more bolts holding this catalytic converter assembly onto the engine. Both are 10mm in size and they are right at the top. You can see one of them right here. So let's get that out. The other one is to the left of it, so towards the passenger side, and it's more difficult to see, but you can definitely just feel for it. If you leave this one in, you should be able to unthread the other one by hand. There it is. And that's because this one is still going to hold it and basically relieve pressure. Finish taking this one off. All right, there it is. Now you should be able to move this upwards. It is somewhat stuck though, so I'm just going to use a rubber mallet to tap it up. It's basically just hooked onto a bracket. All right, this can move around now. We can drop this down like that. Push this inward. Oh, and there we go. As soon as you push it in, it releases from the top. You can slide it right down. There's the catalytic converter assembly. We do have to reuse these shields, so let's get these off. Now on our workbench, let's get all the 10mm fasteners off, if they are still 10mm. Flip it over. It's going to be a bolt on this side. Oh, that's no longer a 10. We'll come back to that one with an extractor socket. Let's take the 2 mounting nuts off on this side. And there's one over here. All right, so we just have one to extract. If you have an extractor socket, tap that on. If not, you can also try a 9mm and tap that on. I have a 3/8 socket, which is the standard equivalent of a 10mm. It's usually a little bit smaller. I'm going to try this one. Got it. I'm going to have to replace this one. The other ones are definitely reusable. Now you can take this shield off. And this one. And there is your catalytic converter assembly. Let's put the shields on the new one. Line these two up. Slide that over. On the other side, it kind of hooks on. And then on top here, we'll go this one, which goes through on this side and hooks over this shield on this side. I'm going to put the bolts in first so that I can make sure that these holes are lined up, since these actually have a slight bit of adjustment to them. I have a new bolt for this one. Tighten these up. Don't make them very tight, just snug. Now we can put the mounting nuts on for the shields on the side here. Snug them up. Nice and snug. Perfect. Take off this bracket and get the head surface ready to reinstall that new catalytic converter. So as soon as we swap the shields, we can just put it right on. 2 more 10mm bolts hold this bracket on. Remove both of those. There we go. Take the bracket off. The gasket will come off as well. Now we have to clean this surface. It is somewhat corroded, so I'm just going to start with a razor blade, scrape everything off, and then if needed, I will use a sanding block to sand it flat. You don't want to use any sort of sanding disc that's super abrasive. You will damage the surface, which is aluminum. It's super soft, and if it's not flat anymore, well, it can't seal up and you'll have an exhaust leak. Now, grab the gasket with the bracket, stick a bolt through, start it on, and do the same to this side over here. Snug these up. Because of the angle of these, I can't actually get a torque wrench in here and accurately torque them. The torque is only 17 foot-pounds, so basically that just means about 1/8 of a turn after they get snug. So I'm just going to take this ratchet and tighten them up by hand. Well, they should already be tight from the impact, but I will double check them by hand. That's pretty tight right there. There's no gasket here on the pipe side, so I'm gonna have to clean the pipe really well. I'm gonna use a wire wheel on a drill and just get all this rust off of here so that the seal can be made properly. This is basically just done by squishing this onto the pipe. Let's clean this up. Now we're finally ready to put the new converter assembly in. You'll see that it has a little lip at the top right there. This has to basically hook into that bracket so that it can, well, secure itself until we put the bolts in. So, slide it up. And you can't really see a whole lot, so just try your best to line it up here. This is what it's gonna look like up there. Once you hook it on, just like that, it has to fall into place. All right, let's get those 2 top bolts in. Move this assembly around as needed until the bolts start nice and smooth like this. If they don't start smoothly, they're, well, either not going into their proper hole or cross-threading, both of which are not good, especially the cross-threading part, because you're putting them right into the head. You don't want to have to deal with that. Once that one lines up, you should be able to line up the second one as well. And we're gonna make them both nice and snug. The torque for these is also 17 foot-pounds. There's no way I can get a torque wrench up in here, so I'm just gonna go for nice and snug on these as well. All right, let's move on to this one. We'll go back to the other one. And tight. Now let's go back to the other one. Okay, there we go. That's pretty tight right there. Before I go further, I want to secure this rear flange so that the pipe stops moving around. Also, if I bolt in the front catalytic converter pipe, this might have a little bit more difficulty moving to line up. So that's why I want to do it now. I have a new gasket. Clean up your surfaces here so that you can have a perfect seal between the two. Try to slide this gasket in here. Make sure you don't damage it in the process. My hardware was rotted, so I'm going to use new hardware. Doesn't matter which direction you thread it in through. I just have a nut and bolt set up here. There we go. Now just tighten up these mounting bolts. What you're looking for here is to just squeeze the pipe down onto the manifold to squish that gasket and create a nice tight seal. There we go. They don't have to be extremely tight. You just have to squish that gasket down a little bit. And there you have it. Here at the bottom, I'm going to use some new hardware, and this is what you want to see right here. The manifold inside of this pipe sitting perfectly like that. Let's get some new hardware through here. I'm just going to snug this up, and I'm going to use the pressure from the bolts to pull this back together. However, I will go back and forth because I want this to pull together evenly. When you tighten these, make them nice and snug, and what you're looking for really is that these get squished together. And if you are worried about an exhaust leak, or if you end up having one here, you can add some gasket maker. There is exhaust rated gasket maker. Make sure you use the one that is rated for high temperatures, and it should seal up your leak pretty well. Let's get the downstream O2 sensor reconnected. I like to put AECs on its threads so that it can hopefully come off easier next time it has to be serviced. Thread it on, make sure it goes on smoothly. All right, that's bottomed out. I'm going to snug it up before I plug it in. Slide that O2 sensor socket over and just give it a quick snug, a little twist like that. They just have a little washer, crush washer, that will, well, crush, and that's how you get it to seal up. So you don't have to crank it down a whole lot, you just have to squish that washer. Now let's plug in the electrical connector. Make sure that clicks, and there was no retainer on this wire. It's pretty short, so just make sure it's out of the way of the fans or the hot exhaust. Now let's reinstall this upstream sensor. Slide it down in here, spin it onto its threads. If the threads are clean, you should be able to just spin it with the wire. And now drop the O2 sensor socket back down. Finish tightening this up. To tighten this, just squish it down a little bit so that gasket can seal up. Just like that. Now let's get the wire plugged in again. There we go. Had to force it with both hands to get it to click, but that's secured perfectly. At this point, go ahead and run the vehicle. Make sure you have no exhaust leaks. If you do, address them, because that would be a safety concern. Other than that, take it for a road test and make sure it's all good.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.